Hey there, this is my contemporary business leader presentation. I chose to interview my current supervisor, Lieutenant Gabriel Tobias, and as well as the other leader I selected to do research on was General Von Ovost, who is a retired Air Force general. So let's go ahead and click this. So business leader description, I chose, like I said, my current supervisor, Gabriel Tobias. I chose him obviously because he's supervising me, but also he has a lot of traits that I wanted to choose to emulate, so I wanted to pick him. He's just very quick-witted, he has very great ideas, and I thought he would just have an interesting perspective, especially when interviewing him. Yeah, so he's a commissioned officer in the United States Air Force. He's currently at Hill Air Force Base. His career field is bioenvironmental engineering, and pretty much we just do occupational safety for the United States Air Force. And he's been here for about 3 years. He'll be going to his next duty station in within the next year or so. All right, so some of his greatest achievements as a leader there was a situation where he was in a specific group within our flight, and he was able to get them several awards for recognition. Most of these people being from different bases, and before Hill Air Force Base, they didn't have the opportunities to either get achievements, or their previous supervisors didn't care as much to get them these achievements. So he sought it upon himself to get recognition for these members. As well as another achievement that he was focusing on when he got to pretty much the group that we're in right now. This was about the last year or so. This group within the organization had historical problems with getting production output out there, not meeting deadlines, stuff like that. And then within the span of probably less than half a year, we were able to get on track, catch up from some of the previous years, as well as keep up throughout this year and focus on planning to catch up for the next few years in advance. So pretty much we caught up and had an increase of 250% of production, which is quite a bit for this group. And yeah, we just met the requirements, stuff like that. For Part A, Lieutenant Tobias scored 37 out of 50, essentially meaning he was a little lower on the empathy side of things, but he was very high on the conceptualism, the implementing the plans, and then the forethought and focusing on the community. We talked about that in the interview a little bit, how that was something that he plans to focus on more in the future. So handling the challenge. So kind of going back to some of the challenges before, this one specifically is a little different. The situation he talked about in their interview was one of the most challenging things that he's dealt with here, was having to discipline an employee. So essentially, I have a little bit of background on this information, but it came down to whether it was just a disciplinary function. The member wasn't quite meeting deadlines or caring about his work. Lieutenant Tobias tried implementing it to the lowest level, so negative reinforcement to try to stop the behavior before it became too problematic. But eventually it led to the punitive side of things, and we had to give him paperwork to punish him in a way. In the Air Force, paperwork is seen as a very negative thing, so it's one of the last things we'd like to do, but sometimes you can't really stop it, and it can encourage a member to do better in the future. It's worked on various people that I've seen in my career. As well as this one for Part B, he scored at 37 out of 50 as well. Same thing, being a little higher on the empathy side this time, but he wasn't focusing quite as much on some of the healing and stuff like before, or not even really as before, but just in general that we spoke about in the interview. Just something to work on in the future that we talked about. And yeah, we'll go on. So power bases and impacts. So I believe Lieutenant Tobias was attempting more of a reward structure, try to reward those around them, positive reinforcement before resulting to negative reinforcement and then punishment. And that's my viewpoint. He eventually came to the point of having to use legitimate power to enforce punishment on somebody, and I don't think it was coercive power just because he's not very malicious with it. It was the last resort he wanted to actually do, and it just kind of led to that because sometimes you have to punish somebody, otherwise that behavior just isn't really being encouraged, but it also isn't being stopped either. So yeah. So mission, vision, strategy, and entrepreneurial mindset. So Lieutenant Tobias was put into a chaotic environment with his new team. There was production issues, stuff like that we talked about before. He was able to adapt to the organization and pretty much bring his current team into a very positive situation where we're ahead of schedule, we're doing great things, and we have a plan for the future, as well as pretty much just continuity, just in case there's a little bit more chaos in the future. So we kind of already planned for that. And application to leadership theory. So having worked with Lieutenant Tobias, I kind of know his mindset. He has a lot of diverse skills. He has thought processes that I can't really replicate, and we kind of balance each other out. He's very task forward. He focuses on just trying to implement things and fitting people where they should fit the best based on their skill sets and behaviors and stuff like that. Yeah, and I think he tries to implement an initiating structure. I believe though that once the situation is focused and honed in, and he doesn't have to maintain the production, he usually tries to orientate more towards relationship orientated behaviors like empathy, like trying to empathize with people more and practice those skills. Leadership style comparison. As I said before, I believe Lieutenant Tobias is very task orientated, but to counteract that, pretty much, I believe General Von Ovost is quite different. She based on her interviews and stuff, it seems like she relates more with a relationship side of behavior and tries to orientate around empathy and ethical mindset, especially with her fellow female airmen, since she's one of the only 4-star women, 4-star general females within the United States Air Force historically. Yeah. When it comes to weaknesses, kind of the same thing with Lieutenant Tobias we talked about before. He's trying to improve some of his empathy skills and healing skills. In the past, I don't think he's really had to use them. He's very smart and very task oriented. So I think when it comes to certain individuals that he's had to use those empathy skills. So I think he's currently working on them. So in the future, he can be a better leader when it comes to balancing out how his mindset and behaviors work. Obviously, I haven't really worked with General Von Ovost. I know she cares about everyone around her. I don't really know if she quite has weaknesses. Everyone has weaknesses. But I believe that usually with relationship-oriented leadership, they have less focus on mission requirements and goals. So maybe that was something that she's had to deal with in the past when she's had empathy as a focus to her skills. Leadership lessons. So there are many characteristics that I think a leader should have, as well as characteristics to avoid. But I kind of want to focus on some of the aspects that I have personally been affected by and think are some of the most important things. Honesty. It's very easy to lose and very hard to gain. So being honest up front makes your life so much easier. It allows you to just be true to yourself and true to those around you. It builds trust, and it just helps you recover better from mistakes. If you make a mistake and you were honest throughout the whole process, I believe it's easier to recover that way. I made a few mistakes before, and that's kind of helped me. Humility is another big one. It's one of the more painful things that I've had to go through is being humiliated, but keeping that humility internally definitely has helped me kind of empathize with others, as well as know where I came from. I believe that's a big part of being a leader, especially when you make higher ranks. And then, we already kind of talked about empathy as well. Empathy just goes a long way. Every person's different and has different requirements and different behaviors and mindsets. So it's very important to kind of understand where they're coming from. Let's go to the next one. And then critical reflections throughout this interview and research process. Lieutenant Tobias, he's my supervisor. I thought he'd be an interesting person to interview. I've learned quite a few things from him, just working under him and throughout this interview. He's very intelligent. He has an interesting mindset with making a very thorough plan very quickly and being able to implement that and fit people like a puzzle where he believes they should. And it's just inspiring to see that work with him. And then General Von Vost, she was just the closest leader that I could try to compare to my experiences as well as my career field. So I chose an Air Force general that I thought had some interesting story to her with piloting and transportation. Speaking to him beforehand though, I had to kind of explain some of the definitions like locus of control and stuff like that. So beforehand we kind of talked about it. I talked about some of the definitions, explained them, and then I kind of went over the matrices with him just to say like, hey, this is how it looks, this is how it should go, and then we kind of worked with it together and then did the interview. But yeah, I learned a lot about my supervisor. It's always interesting to pick his brain about certain things, and I kind of just know how he is, so I was able to kind of get more information out of him a certain way just because I've worked with him so long. But yeah, I'm just looking at that. Yeah, the research is very interesting too. I got a lot of knowledge about just history of my organization as well as history. I'm a very influential leader, one of the very few 4-star females within the Air Force, so that was very interesting to learn about. Outside of that though, these are going to be my references, and yeah, that'll be my presentation. I appreciate you taking your time to watch this.